What started off as fans worldwide are riveted to the drama as rumors on podcasts and subtle comments on the internet have suddenly exploded into a full-fledged altercation. In the most recent phase, Yandy didn't only protect herself off. Her statements were so incisive that even seasoned watchers were taken aback. The assertion that caused a stir on social media was nothing short of explosive. Yandy is implying that Rasheeda marriage is to blame, at long-kept secrets and bringing up the notorious DNA test that supporters believed had been abandoned in the past. There was a lot of tension in the room, every syllable pouring with flames, and the audience could tell by the glances that this was more than reality TV. It was personal. The audience is already claiming that with both ladies refusing to back down and making allegations that go straight to the core of loyalty and family, this may be the most intense confrontation in the show's recent history. One question looms large in the air as the dust starts to settle. How much and how far would Yandy go to make her point? Is Rasheeda willing to divulge more? That was the type of short-lived smile that was on Yandy's face. The type of smile you had on your face before you drop a brutally honest truth. Looked straight at Rasheeda. Additionally, you could sense years of frustration rising up. The room went cold. Everyone anticipated a new back-and-forth dispute. However, what was going to occur wasn't a simple altercation. A storm was just waiting to happen, Yandy said firmly as she leaned forward a little. Stable and sufficiently acute to cut through the air. She asserted that Rasheeda had spoken for too long and that it was now her responsibility to clarify the situation. In front of her, Rasheeda also didn't think twice. She immediately retaliated, raising her voice and displaying angry body language as though she had been anticipating this very moment. With each syllable, she moved her hands. "You've turned me and Kirk into a storyline," she murmured. She said in a scathing tone that was equal parts incredulous and angry. "But your own life isn't as clean as you pretend it is." To make her argument more obvious, she intended to rock the table. Spectators were unable to take their eyes off it. Comments were flying across the screen already, giving spectators a sense that this would be one of the most heated clashes in hip-hop and love history. After a brief period of leaning back, Yandy stepped forward once more, her gaze narrowing. Her remarks were more powerful than any scream, even though she didn't raise her voice. "Could. Your own husband had to swab your baby," she said hesitantly. "Remember that." There was complete silence in the room. It was one of those phrases that changes the mood right away. Individuals, the background actors stopped in position, the producers looked surprised, and everyone gasped. Rasheeda's face suddenly became red, her features displaying bewilderment as she tried to construct her subsequent phrase. Rasheeda said, "You're lying," her voice wavering between rage and shame. "I owe no one, even you," and she gave a brief explanation regarding my marriage, revealing the underlying rage. "What happens in my house stays in my house." Yandy raised her eyebrows and repeated, "Lying?" But Yandy didn't give her a chance to catch her breath. "So the podcasts and interviews you did in which you revealed half the tale never happened? Or do you simply forget the leaning closer, her tone mocking now? She made sure every camera captured every word she spoke. "Things you admit once people call you out on them?" The audience behind the cameras shifted uneasily, as if they realized that this was no longer reality TV. Instead, it had become something unvarnished, something personal. Rasheeda tightened her hands on the table and her head turned sharply, causing her earrings to swing. "What you do, Yandy, is distort things. You have no idea what you're talking about." Her wrath reverberated throughout the entire act, but Yandy was unfazed. "You play the victim after twisting people's comments." "No," Yandy answered coolly, lowering her voice to a freezing silence. "I don't lie. I just restate what you have previously stated. Perhaps it's simpler for you to blame me than to confront the truth in your own house." The tension was thick and her tone was heavy yet smooth, as if she were allowing Rasheeda to drown in her own past. The room's temperature rose as the two ladies probed further into wounds that had obviously never been treated before, and even the crew members exchanged anxious glances. Repaired. The DNA test wasn't the only factor. Pride, reputation, and the necessity to demonstrate who actually controlled the "let's get one thing straight," Rasheeda said, leaning forward and resting her palms firmly on the table as though she were anchoring herself. "Love and hip-hop legacy. I built my marriage," she continued, her voice as harsh as glass. "I battled for it. Whatever, despite our difficulties, I never fled. Are you able to say the same? Or are you too preoccupied with rushing from one city to another?" Are you attempting to persuade others that you are the ideal wife? Her remarks, each intended to extract blood, came like daggers. Yandy shook her head and laughed bitterly. Perfect wife? Nobody claimed I was, but at least I don't create my keep on acting like I'm not. You flaunt your marriage as if it were a trophy, then act shocked when others point out the flaws in it. Glass. Rasheeda, that's denial, not strength. The internet viewers were enthralled. One person said, "This is messy, but I love it." She went there. Another said, memes exploded on social media inside pictures of Rasheeda's shocked expression that have been going viral for minutes with captions like, "Not the DNA test." Yandy followed through on her statement. Rasheeda, however, wasn't going to sit back and let the internet make fun of her. She lifted her chin in defiance, her eyes searing holes into Yandy. You believe that old slander and tales will bring me down? Please, I've made it through more than you will eventually find out. My name, my family, and my business. When everyone wanted to see me, I managed to keep my composure. Fail. Yandy grinned and cocked her head as if she had been waiting for that very response. And I don't need to prove anything to you, she said. Funny, she replied quietly, almost too calmly. Since you talk about me a lot for someone who doesn't have to prove anything, have you received a Google alert about my name? It is impossible for you to go a day without mentioning me. Her Rasheeda smashed her fist on the table, her voice bursting as the room erupted in nervous laughter and the tone dripped with venom. You can't compare to me, Yandy, despite your obsession with me, constant attempts to bring me down, and constant comparisons to yourself. You never will. In marriage, business, or anything else. And suddenly, the argument had changed from being defensive to being offensive, and Rasheeda was no longer only attempting to protect her marriage. Yandy slowly got to her feet, her chair scuffing the floor, and began to attack Yandy's entire identity, her entire function on the program, and her entire place in the brand. Compare, she continued, her voice higher now, raw with emotion. But I don't need to compare. It sounded even more intense. I've shown myself already. I have established my empire. I've brought up my children. Additionally, I've supported my boyfriend through situations that most women would never make it through. When half of your tale is about you, don't bring up comparisons with me. Acting as though your house isn't collapsing. Chaos broke out in the room. Members of the cast who had been discreetly observing were now attempting to help, their shouts drowning out the commotion as they gasped. Neither woman, however, was willing to compromise. Words weren't enough anymore. It was conflict. Every camera panned in, capturing every sneer that conveyed years of rivalry, every eye roll, and every tear that brimmed. This wasn't simply another brawl, the team realized. The news would be dominated for weeks by this type of spectacular incident. And one thing became evident as both ladies refused to back down. Neither was going to go without saying anything. The room's air had become so dense, with such strain that the cameras appeared to quiver when they narrowed their focus. While Rasheeda stood, Yandy remained erect and refused to back down. Ready for another round, she squared her shoulders like a boxer. They both didn't blink. Neither became softer, and there was an electric charge in the stillness between their subsequent statements. The audience could sense their own heartbeats quickening, as though they were themselves in the midst of the storm. With a harsh tone and words that were designed to rip through everything, Rasheeda was the first to break the stillness. You'd like to sit down? Come and disparage my marriage? She said, her voice trembling solely with rage. Your guy, however, has been out and don't pretend you've been living in a fantasy world while you sit here criticizing me. These streets are making you appear foolish. Her lips curved back in a sneer, her eyes narrowing, a deliberate blow meant to strike Yandy where she knew it hurt most. Yandy's chuckle was short, sour, and bordering on nasty. Oh, so you want to speak about my boyfriend now? She fired back. I'm glad I don't have to wake up every morning worrying about if my marriage would be revealed by the blogs once more. At least when my problems surface. I don't sit there grinning and acting like everything is okay when everyone else can see the flaws. Comments poured in from internet viewers. One admirer commented, "She didn't just say that." Another person typed, "This is the real love in hip-hop. No scripts needed." Hashtags like R were already trending on social media. Within minutes, Yandy vs. Rasheeda and DNA receipts became popular. Before the battle was even over, memes began to circulate on Twitter. Images of Yandy's cold look with the text, "Not the DNA test." Rasheeda's eyebrows went up, saying, "You're a demon." Rasheeda had no intention of allowing the internet to make fun of her. She gave another clap, this time with more force. As the spectators watched, there was a digital explosion. Already there were clips of the one-liner going around, being slowed down, repeated, and transformed into instant TikToks. People were actively picking sides. Hashtags that split the internet into Yandy's Chatra Squad and Rasheeda's Chatra Squad. Yandy wasn't finished, though. Her voice was louder than ever, and her eyes were burning brighter. Do you want to discuss how I'm not real? At least I'm not forced to sit here and act as though I've never been embarrassed in front of my partner. The entire planet. At least I'm not subjected to rumors of DNA testing and questions about the paternity. Don't, Rasheeda, forget. The folks you are attempting to deceive are the ones who will always remember the truth. Rasheeda's. Even though her hands were shaking, she clenched them into fists and gripped her chair's arms so tightly that her knuckles became white. She rose slowly, towering above, her heels tapping on the floor. Yandy. Don't you ever speak on my children, she yelled. You don't cross that line, therefore don't you dare? The room let out a gasp. Yandy even took a moment to realize how deep the incision had gone. She didn't give up, though. Her nose nearly touched Rasheeda's when she leaned in to speak to her. Then ceased dragging. She responded firmly, my name through the mud. When you can't even maintain order in your own home, stop acting like the franchise's queen. The workers scurried, some attempting to intervene while others stood in disbelief. The yelling intensified. The words flew more quickly, each more scathing than the last insult. The atmosphere was nearly intolerable, like a pressure cooker on the verge of blowing up. Admirers couldn't get enough of it online. This is iconic, one commenter cried out. One more person said, I've never seen them go this hard. People were breaking down every phrase, gesture, and emotion in whole Twitter conversations. The conflict was no longer only about scandals or weddings at that point. It has to do with legacy. It was about who would be seen as the real hip-hop and love queen. Furthermore, neither woman was prepared to relinquish that crown. The fire and rage in their eyes were captured by the cameras as they zoomed in close. Voices, as well as the current state of complete disarray. Reality TV was no longer the only thing. It was a momentous occasion. The spectators were aware that what they were seeing would be discussed for years to come. Voices were trembling in the room. However, it was not the yelling that produced the loudest noises. They came from the cameras, the gasps, and the startled quiet. As they focused on each piercing expression, they were worried. Face to face, Yandy and Rasheeda were still, both driven by years of animosity and years of fans arguing about who in the series actually wore the crown. Nervously, the producers murmured to one another. Gold was in front of them, but they also realized that things were getting out of hand. Some cast members even made an effort to step in, their hands outstretched like a fight referee. However, each time someone intervened, Rasheeda or Yandy would yell more loudly, compelling the return the focus to themselves. Through the commotion came Rasheeda's voice. She said, You're jealous, Yandy, pointing straight at her opponent. That's what this is about. You can't stand that I'm still standing tall and that I've held it down. You grin for the cameras while you're drowning, but everyone can see that your life is collapsing. Her tone was victorious, as if she had delivered the final blow. Yandy, however, was unfazed. She tilted her head and grinned, with that perilous composure that always made her remarks more poignant. Falling apart, she said again in a quiet yet razor-sharp voice. At least I didn't sit on a couch and cry while my husband's faults were being broadcast on national television. You call that strength? No, Rasheeda, that's humiliation, the world chuckled. You caused it yourself. There was another collective gasp from the audience. A few of the women in the bay room muttered under their breath and shook their heads. Others murmured that Yandy was only expressing what everyone else had been thinking, but others expressed concern that she had gone too far. Online fans were actually divided. Time. Supporters of Tomer's team Yandy commended Yandy for being brutally honest, while those of Team Rasheeda referred to her as callous. Rasheeda had fire in her eyes. Her finger pricked Yandy's face as she stepped closer. Never bring up my suffering as though it were your own. Weapon. You have no idea what it's like to repair a marriage and support your partner while everyone else is pulling him down. We call that loyalty. Something that is obviously beyond your comprehension. She masked the little crack in her voice, more furiously yelling over Yandy before she could answer. Yandy's voice rose in rage as she shoved her hand away. Devotion. Since your spouse couldn't even remain faithful to you, don't lecture me about fidelity. Avoid twisting your suffering into a prize of some sort. In actuality, you stayed because you were at a loss for options. because your whole brand rely on that union. And you know it in your heart. Chaos broke out in the room once more. Some it sounded like screaming as the actors let out gasps. No one paid attention to the producer's yell, "Cut the cameras!" Every moment of the meltdown was captured by the cameras that continued to roll. Then Rasheeda laughed almost without warning. It wasn't the humorous type of chuckle. It dripped poison and was cold and unpleasant. You believe that using your old tales? Do you really believe you can use headlines that I've already experienced to lure me along? I'm still here, baby. I made it through everything. Are you able to say the same? If your partner decides he's sick of playing home, will your narrative come to an end? With you? Yandy stopped for a moment as the line struck hard, reverberating through the set like a gun fired in the dark. Her eyes narrowed with wrath, her lips tightened, and then she retaliated with sharp, quick words. If my guy ever... Since I created something of my own, I would still be standing if you left. Rasheeda, you constructed everything on a foundation of deceit and treachery. Didn't make it. You made a compromise and are now resentful, attempting to bring everyone down with you. Stirred, muttering to one another, some shaking their heads at the cruelty of the conversation, some nodding in accord with Yandy, felt conflicted on the internet. One remark said, "This is too real," while another said, "They're going too far, yet I can't turn away." Yandy's voice then dropped another bombshell that no one had anticipated. And let's not forget the blogs, with all those headlines about your boyfriend going out, that broke through the room once again. You believe that time erases screenshots and that people forget all those receipts that people pulled up. Rasheeda, you've been trying to dodge them for years, yet every single controversy endures forever. Rasheeda's jaw fell, anger erupting. You're obsessed with me? She said. Obsessed? You sit here and pretend to be above me, yet everything you say is about me, and you have a long list of my "it's sick, Yandy," to live your life as though you're keeping score. That's not power. Obsession. Yandy's voice rose to a near shout for the first time. No, that's me being honest. You wanted to talk about me? That's me refusing to remain silent while you defame me in podcasts and interviews. The audience leaned in as though they were waiting, but now you have to face me and I'm not keeping anything back. For the explosion. Online fans pleaded for more, and videos went viral. And just when the tension seemed to be building, Rasheeda turned the tables once more, unable to ascend any higher. You keep talking about my man, she murmured, her voice now steady and almost uncanny calm. Let's discuss yours, though. How many times has he made you feel embarrassed? How often have we heard? Rumors that he doesn't even want to be in your presence? Yandy, you don't frighten me. You're as damaged as the others. You simply conceal it more effectively. The ensuing hush was deafening. Everyone realized that the argument had moved into that type of quiet. Hazardous area. Instead of shaking with dread, Yandy's hands trembled with the anger of someone whose pride had just been torn apart. She took a step. She stepped nearer, her voice trembling with rage until she was only inches from Rasheeda. She growled, "Talk about me all you want, but never doubt the love that exists in my household. Never do. You can discuss my name, my company, and even my past, but don't mention my family." Beyond ratings or plots, the conflict had taken on a human dimension. This was no longer only for amusement. This was actual suffering, actual